live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you and delivers the very best guests in all of true crime. Another amazing panel here tonight. Feels like I was just speaking to you moments ago, but that was the last night. A very interesting show. If you didn't catch it, please do. We had a former assistant DA out of Tallahassee, Jeremy Mutz, last night, along with Stephen Webster and Anthony Rickman. They had interesting things to say, as this panel will, I'm sure. Of course, this is it. This is the final week before Donna Adelson's trial begins. There is one more hearing. That is this Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. And hopefully my pal Tim Jansen is going to be by my side for live coverage of that. So please join us then, and we will get that to you live. And then next week on Monday, Steve Cohen and I heading up to Tallahassee. It's going to be a long drive with my brother from another mother, and we will be making some stops along the way because Steve Cohen likes to get his 64-ounce diet sodas. So we will be doing that along the road trip. I might have water. I might cave and get a Coke. You just never know. So without further ado, Jo Potuto, who was once a member of STS Nation, I guess she still is. She was in some of the chats. Steve Cohen she caught his eye, and he knows talent, and then he brought Jo Potuto on. She is the Richard H. Larson Professor of Constitutional Law Emerita at the University of Nebraska College of Law. That is a lot. That's a long title. She has taught at the law colleges of, listen to these universities: North Carolina, Chapel Hill; Oregon; Arizona; Rutgers, my hometown; Seton Hall; and Cardozo. She's also taught in summer programs at Cambridge University, and she was the principal drafter, author, reporter for the Nebraska Supreme Court project to draft uniform jury instructions for criminal trials. This woman knows the law inside out, as does Dr. Melissa Hamilton, JD, PhD. She's a senior lecturer of law and criminal justice at the University of Surrey School of Law. That is in the UK, although she is American, and as you guessed it, she holds a JD and a PhD. Josh Ritter has a few less letters, but it makes up for it in kindness after his name. Josh Ritter, named the 2015 Outstanding Prosecutor of the Year by the Association of Deputy District Attorneys. He's now a member of the firm that bears his name, El Dabe Ritter Trial Lawyers. He also hosts the amazing podcast, Courtroom Confidential. It is Courtroom Confidential. If you have not subscribed, do it. And if you have not subscribed, do it now, because Josh is a proud new dad of little baby Remy, who's just a few days old. Congrats, Josh. How is the baby, and how's the older sibling taking it?
Thank you very much. Baby Remy is fantastic. She was born early Wednesday morning, just last Wednesday. She's doing great. Mama's doing great. She came a little bit early. We were expecting her not for another week or two. So she's impatient already and decided to show up early. And her older sisters are both very happy to have her. Our oldest one is thrilled because she feels like she can kind of be a mama, but the middle one is a little cautious because she's not quite sure how this affects her seniority status in the household just yet. So she's kind of giving her side eye, but they're both very happy and everybody's healthy. So we're thrilled.
Well, that's the most important part. For some reason, I thought you only had one, but now you've got three. So you're in my category. Yeah. And they're all girls.
Yes. The good Lord saw fit to bless me with 3 girls, and we're very, very happy.
Wow. Look at this. So there we go. Raven knows it because they watch Courtroom Confidential. Josh just welcomed another beautiful little girl. Awesome to hear. So Josh Ritter, let's start with you, since you're the new dad girl, once again, times 3, as they say.
Yes.
Or girl dad, I guess it is.
Girl dad.
Is it dad girl dad? I don't know.
Hashtag girl dad.
Yeah, there you go. So there's a hearing this Thursday. This is going to be the final hearing. And the judge indicated, Judge Stephen Everett, that he wants to hear from a guy named Sergeant Chris Corbett, who's handling digital forensic evidence. The state has a 329 page PowerPoint presentation that the defense is basically objecting to. The judge has indicated this evidence is going to come in, but just depends in what form. That's going to be discussed Thursday. What other sorts of things come up the 3-4 days before jury selection is set to begin? Could there be any big surprises?
I don't know if there's going to be any big surprises. I think we've had rulings on kind of the most fundamental issues. You know, the biggest one obviously being their attempt to try to have the indictment dismissed based upon that delay in prosecution, which I think the judge came out, made the correct decision. But that was probably the one of all the defense motions that had a little bit of teeth to it, because there was an argument to be made that, hey, your case is basically a rerun of the last 3 trials that we've had. Why are you taking so long to having indicted Miss Donna Adelson? But the prosecution, I think, had some good answers to that. But this issue with what he wants to hear from this expert for is kind of interesting too, because the prosecution, if you guys have been following this, how they have taken just a morass of evidence, of just this complicated web of cell phone calls and everything else, and been able to develop it and present it in a way that's easy for the jurors to understand. Because you have to appreciate that they've taken years and time and effort to understand all of this, and now they got to present it in a way through a witness in a few hours that the jurors can wrap their heads around. So they put together this elaborate PowerPoint presentation to explain all of that. The defense is objecting, saying that should not be an exhibit. Fine, you can use it as a demonstrative, but we don't think you should actually be able to admit it as a piece of evidence and allow it to go back into the jury room. And the judge is saying, before I make any rulings on any of that, how it's going to be used, whether or not it will be marked as a evidence exhibit, I need to hear from this expert myself how that was actually compiled and what information he used to actually create this demonstrative document. So you see this occasionally sometimes in trials where, both sides, prosecution and defense, will try to create their own quote unquote piece of evidence. And it's up to the judge on whether or not it is objective enough for the jurors to actually use it, or are they going to be strictly confined to the actual quote unquote evidence, which would be the raw data, the raw cell phone evidence.
Super planner girl, just letting you know, Josh, in case you were having a relaxing day, that your house will be super fun in about 10 to 13 years.
Yeah.
Buckle up.
I get a lot of people telling me that, so I'm preparing myself now.
Do what I do and escape. You have a real office. I have a faux studio that I escaped to. So you got to have something. We'll go clockwise here. Dr. Hamilton, obviously we've had you on about this subject mostly, and other subjects. Again, the trial is just 4 days away. By the way, Jo Potuto, the doctor, the professor, gave me an amazing list of very interesting questions. That's really what I want to focus the show on. Once we get through these intros here, we'll go through them kind of one by one and have everyone give their take. But Dr. Hamilton, what are you most anticipating with this trial? Just 4 days out or so, 5 days out.
Oh, that, as always, it will have twists and turns. So what the viewers might be interested in is that the judge made some rulings in the last few hearings, but then reserved some of his rulings to the trial itself. So, that's a mixed bag then. Is that's one of the challenges of litigators is you go right into trial and you don't know whether some piece of evidence that you're heavily reliant upon, the judge suddenly says you can't use that. So it will, this is going to be really good viewing. I think your being in the courtroom will be important because even last minute things can shift dramatically. So this is really a made for TV and made for podcast event yet again. So everyone who's interested in it, yes, you will be, I'm sure, excited to be part of it. And let's see what happens. We can't anticipate a lot.
All right. That was Carm FaceTiming me right in the middle of the podcast. And good chances when she does that, I got to take this. I'm podcasting, Carm. This is love you. Bye. There she goes. The only call I take during the show, during the live show, is my mother who FaceTime. When I get a FaceTime, by the way, my entire screen goes haywire. Everything disappears. So anyway, that's Carm for you. Tara Ellis, save all those super chats, Josh. Girls are expensive. I can definitely back. I can corroborate all that. Jo Potuto, you put together, as I said, this amazing list of questions that we're about to get to. And I'm glad Dr. Hamilton brought it up because we are going to be covering this live, gavel to gavel, from the beginning of jury selection through the verdict. Who knows when that will be? And I will be live chatting and doing live lunch lives and then evening shows. So it's going to be a crazy couple of weeks. But Jo Potuto, same to you. I mean, just before we get into the questions, are you anxious about something ahead of this trial? Curious about something? What jumps out at you a few days out?
I guess I'm not anxious since I'm not trying the case. I can sit back and watch, not worry. The thing that I'm most curious about is what they're doing with Charlie. He's listed on the state's list, and I just cannot imagine that they're going to call him as a witness. If he has turned on somebody, they've kept that as the best secret since, I guess, the atom bomb, and that one wasn't kept extraordinarily well. So I'm less expecting and more curious. I'd like to hear from Sarah, whatever her name is. What's her last name? The girl, the friend
Yusuf,
of Wendy's.
Yusuf,
Yeah, what she's talking about, what that secret hearing with Robert is about, and whether he'll actually testify so that we'll know. My hope is that all the little secret things we don't know about come out during the trial so I can walk away with my curiosity completely satiated.
Yeah. By the way, last night's show got a little heated. That's because people are passionate. I talked to everybody. Everybody's fine. There was a mentor lawyer broke a story last night about the possibility, and I want to underscore possibility, big underscore, of preferential treatment by a judge or some funny business going on behind the scenes in Tallahassee. You should check out his video at Deep Dive True Crime. But I spoke to everybody. They're all adults. Everyone's telling me that, different things here in the chat. And everyone is coming back and everyone was happy. And sometimes there are vigorous debates. And that's what happened yesterday. So I'm glad you guys are checking in. Everything is fine. That's my job. And I was taking care of it and still taking care of it to make sure everybody is cool. So Jo Potuto's first question, I'm gonna throw to Josh Ritter and see how the professor thinks he answered the question. We have to have a title for these when the professor offers the questions. You're back in law school, Josh. Jo Potuto's question was, is it possible for a last minute Donna Adelson deal? And what would Donna have to offer Georgia and the state?
I mean, I don't think it's possible. I mean, of course it's possible. I mean, I imagine there's some sort of offer on the table that if she were to take it, they would, forego a trial. But given her age, I imagine she looks at any sentence that puts her in custody for any significant period of time as essentially a life term for her. So I can't imagine the state offering her something that wouldn't include significant prison time. I mean, regardless of what they feel her involvement is, she's charged with conspiracy and murder. And the way that the state has been treating this is that the most culpable parties are the people who they seem to be getting to towards the end. I know that the shooters and the actual people involved in orchestrating the murder were tried first, but it's really the masterminds with Charlie and now Mom towards the end, who they've saved for last with the state. And I think that they view their culpability as far as they're the ones who got these wheels turning to begin with as being far more culpable, far more, the people that they want to hold responsible than anyone else. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying If there is an offer, I doubt it's something she'll take, and I think she's willing to take her chances because I think she looks at anything as being a life sentence. Plus, just to add, I also feel that her connection is probably the most attenuated. Not that it's not strong, but it's like we're now one more degree of separation away from the actual people holding the weapon, and that's going to be, not difficult, but a little bit more heavy lifting, in my view, for the prosecution.
Dr. Hamilton, any thoughts on a last minute September, not October, but September surprise here with Donna?
Always possible in this case that there are last minute surprises. I think in terms of the prosecution is if Donna, which I think it's highly doubtful, but if she were to give them evidence to give them Wendy, I think the prosecution is very interested in getting Wendy. And the prosecution, as most, is generally not overly interested in jailing an older women for a long period. One of the things that's interesting in sentencing is that there are different goals of sentencing, which sometimes conflict. So in terms of retribution, what they are charging Donna with would deserve a really long time. But in terms of specific deterrence, it's very unlikely that Donna is going to, although she's charged with it, but going to try to murder somebody again in the future. So that would weigh against not trying to jail her long. But again, I can only see it if potentially she would turn on Wendy, but I really don't think that she would. Of these, the one I suspected the most would be most likely to turn on his family would be Charlie, and he didn't do that. So there are significant family bonds here.
Yeah, I mean, some people are, I don't know, speculating that now Charlie in his transport to Tallahassee, maybe he'll squeal on Wendy. We can discuss that in a little while. Just saw John Sawicki in the chat, digital forensic expert, a best guess. Shout out to John. Hope you won your baseball game the other day. Stephen Webster is passionate about the truth. This is true. So, Professor Potuto, your question, your answer. Could there be a last-minute surprise here with Donna? The other two guests don't really seem to think so. And if so, what would have to be offered up for that?
Yeah, excuse me. I don't think so either. I'm just wondering if it were possible for Donna to be willing to flip on Wendy if she could arrange for some benefit to Charlie. And that's the only way I would see that happening, if that were feasible, because she's got two children here, one who has seemed to have separated all connection with her. The other one, who was a loyal son, is, largely in prison because of her. And seems to me that divided loyalty, if it were possible for her to get something for him, might prompt her. But I think she'd do that more likely after the trial than at the beginning of the trial. I don't know whether she thinks she's going to be acquitted, but I think she probably holds out hope for it.
Yeah. Illuminator says Donna won't flip on Wendy. And then here, Professor Potuto, what's your answer to this question? Do you think Wendy knows how many people on YouTube want her arrested? I mean, do you think she's watching these shows? I mean, she's a smart woman. She knows the heat is on. Do you think she's trying to get the temperature?
If you listen to her, she never read the indictment in what was it, Charlie's case, and she's never read any of the documents anywhere. So if you listen to her, the answer is no, but I don't believe it. I mean, I don't know. And maybe Josh, you know someone who went to, or Melissa went to law school and had no curiosity about these things, but she seems to be the most completely uncurious lawyer I have, taking her at her word, that I've ever heard of. So I don't think it's like, yes, I think if she's not watching, somebody is watching on her behalf and cluing her in.
Yeah. Josh Ritter, if Donna does testify, and the odds, the betting odds are that she does it open the door to new evidence being admitted? If she says something potentially, I guess the bigger question is, explain to the non-lawyers how this works. If she gets up on the stand and says something that the state wants to cross-examine her on, they're then allowed to open the door potentially to new evidence. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think right now of what the judge has kept out that might open the door to. There's been some discussion about the jailhouse calls that were made since the time of Charlie's conviction and before her arrest, or actually it wasn't since the time of his conviction. I guess it was maybe perhaps even earlier than that, because she took off to Vietnam not soon after he was convicted. But I know there was some discussion about whether or not those would be admissible. But to answer your question, yes, if she gets up there, it's kind of fair game on anything. And she could easily open up the door towards the prosecution getting in evidence that they may have been precluded from earlier by way of impeachment. If she says something contradictory and they are able to impeach her with either a prior inconsistent statement or some evidence that for whatever reason was being kept out before, and now that becomes relevant by something that she says, even, and she's got to be very careful. This is a lot of the reason why defendants don't take the stand, is you're doing a high wire act by making sure that you don't say even kind of an innocuous statement, these kind of all-encompassing statements. I never felt that way. I would never do such and such. I have always A, B, C, and D. Whenever you make these kind of broad, all-encompassing statements, then the prosecution goes, oh, aha, you said you never would speak such and such a way. Well, let's take a look at this, and it opens up an entire door. So I think the odds of her taking the stand, if that is going to happen, and I agree that there's, maybe a likelihood of that, because she's got some explaining to do, and she's probably the person best positioned to do that if she actually wants to mount any kind of convincing defense here. But they have to go into that knowing that basically opens the door for everything.
And Dr. Hamilton, Josh just said it opens the door. I mean, the consensus from all the lawyers I've talked to, who are infinitely smarter than I am, they all say that Donna has to testify. She has to explain away this extortion theory, the double extortion theory. How risky is it on the flip side for someone as shrewd as Georgia Kappelman and Sarah Dugan to then cross her on stuff that she may not even realize she's getting herself into?
Well, my bet is that Donna will testify. I think she can't help herself. Just so her son Charlie is, a chip off the old block. They seem to come from a similar mindset, which is, we can win this. We can convince other people. They both want to control the narrative. And Donna has indicated in her interactions with law enforcement generally that she wants to control the narrative of this as well. So I think she won't be able to help herself about thinking that she can get on the stand and convince the jury that she's an innocent person. But that will then, so the point is, by controlling the narrative, instead of just responding to questions, is I think she'll try to assert certain things, and that will then, and you have, very talented prosecutors here, will then increase the risk that it does open the door to some of the things that the judge has precluded. For example, more information about the finances. So, I think she'll get on and she'll want to portray things and get out her perspective, and she won't have the legal mindset that her daughter has about being careful of that.
Jo Potuto, to the professor. Again, how did your question, obviously, how slippery is the slope that she could go on here when she's testifying?
I think it's full of ice. But I don't know. I mean, that double, extortion theory has to come in somehow, and it's convoluted enough and hard enough to understand when somebody is explaining it. I don't know how they would do it if they were going to have to get it in by evidence coming in dribs and drabs from different witnesses and exhibits. I don't know how the jury would ever be able to make sense out of it. Maybe the defense would be better off if the jury couldn't make sense out of it, because once you get it straightened out and hear it, it's just crazy. But I do think they have practiced with her, and they're anticipating the kinds of questions that are going to come up on cross. I think they're going to have her about as fully prepared as it's possible to be. That does not mean she's going to be able to stay on script. I really think if you jab her in the wrong place, she's going to erupt. And no prior advice and counseling and training it will avoid it. So her testimony might be quite the spectacle. And if this wasn't a murder trial with such tragic results, it would be sort of great viewing pleasure for,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Definitely have to keep in mind it is about justice for Dan Markel here, and all the victims that suffered, including Charlie Adelson's son, doesn't deserve any of this, and the gangster's sons too. Joanna here. Donna will be better on the stand because she's a very controlling person. This is kind of Joe is just kind of saying that she might not be able to control herself. What do you think? And shout out to Space Ghost for gifting 5 Surviving the Survivor memberships. I mean, Josh, you've been in the courtroom a lot. Donna Adelson, no doubt, is very controlling. All you have to do is look at her planner to see that. You think she can keep it together. Charlie was kind of very soft-spoken, obviously incredibly well-rehearsed, and that was kind of the rub against him, that he was too well-rehearsed. He was a little too smooth. Do you think Donna can pull off testifying here without getting herself in a whole lot more trouble?
I don't, and for the same reason that that comment was that she will, because she's too controlling. I think that this is a woman who has not been challenged very much in her life. That she is kind of very entitled, and she's usually the one doing the challenging. You know, I see her as the person who's sending back the meal. You know what I'm saying? She is not someone who kind of tolerates a lot of nonsense in her life as she views it. And we see that, you know, in the emails, the way that she talked about Dan Markel and how they were going to try to, you know, first extort him for money and then challenge him based on religion. This is a person who likes to get their way. And that arrest video, the badge cam arrest video, I think we saw her personality coming out a lot too, that this is a person who, you know, whenever challenged or told to do something she doesn't want to do, is kind of appalled by that. And I could see the prosecution getting under her skin, and it may not happen immediately. And I think you're right that she's probably going to be very prepared, and she'll probably last for a while. But, you know, as the hours tick by and they continue to grind at her, I could see her true personality and true colors coming out, and that she may just start to slip up. And that's the thing about testifying as a defendant, is you have to be nearly perfect for you to convince those jurors. And I just don't know if she's got it in her.
It's so interesting. I mean, just to follow up on that, because I'm fascinated by this, and you guys have all seen it in the courtroom firsthand. But Sarah says Jo Potuto is right. Donna will crack on cross. Dr. Hamilton, is there a strategy among prosecutors? Will they try to extend the cross to keep it going in order to trip her up? Is there a strategy behind this?
Sure, because as much as you can be controlled, the longer it goes, the less likely that you're going to be able to continue that, particularly in a very emotional situation. Now, what the prosecution, and I'm sure they're aware of this, have to be careful of is they have to treat her slightly differently than Charlie or others, because she is an older woman. And so the jury is very sensitive, particularly in Florida, where there's a lot of elderly people. I grew up in Florida, so quite aware of it. Is they'll be, if they're seen, prosecution is seen as insensitive in mistreating an older woman, the jury won't like that. Now, the counter to that, though, is that once they get enough experience of Donna, I think they'll see that she's not a wallflower and she's not weak. But it will take a bit to overcome the normal bias we have of assuming that older females are more sensitive and, you know, need our protection, rather than viewing her as somebody who could mastermind this big plot. So there's a balancing act that's going to be had. But I think that these prosecutors are intelligent enough and experienced with this kind of population in Florida that they'll be aware of that.
Yeah. By the way, that's a great point. And this is a great point from Genzo33 to the Professor Potuto. I was in court for the first time recently. Boring case, but preparing is one thing. Court is intimidating, no matter how prepared you think you are. It's like stepping onto the field for the Super Bowl after the practice field here. It's going to be super high profile, as we know. Jo Potuto, Dateline 2020, the Over My Dead Body podcast, the STS. The list goes on and on and on. And now she's going to be in that box beside Judge Everett offering testimony. What is it like to go from the practice field to the playing field?
Well, having never played a sport, I'm going to have to kind of extrapolate and analogize here, but obviously it's different. And I think at the hearing last week, you could see it in her, that the reality of what's coming up is now hitting her. She looked a little overwhelmed. I'm sure that's how it's going to feel at the beginning of the trial. But you get inured to that sort of stuff as it goes on. By the second or third day, the jury is there, the cameras are there, the judge is there, the gallery is full. And I think at that point, you can start putting it in your side view or rear view mirror. And I think she'll feel that way a little bit on the stand, but I think she's going to be primed and energized when she gets on the stand, at least at the start. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Georgia or Sarah, whoever does the cross, jump around in the cross chronologically and in what the story is, just to keep her off balance. And the more she gets off balance and she can't control it. I mean, look what she did with her life. When she couldn't control Robert, she pretty much wiped him, out of the family picture. I think her way of handling things is I win or I walk away. And she can't get off that stand and walk away. And that's going to be a very new experience for her.
Yeah,
and she's doing it in prime time with an audience where you don't want to fail. You want to look your best.
A leopard does not change its spots, so it's going to be interesting to see.
Joel,
that is for sure. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Sorry to jump in, but as we were talking, I was just thinking, and this is a case that fans of your show will absolutely remember, but think about Alec Murdaugh. This guy spent his entire professional career inside a courtroom as an advocate, speaking to jurors, convincing them, giving, by all accounts, he was a very talented and accomplished attorney. Put him on the stand, and this, that's about as good as you're going to get as far as the defendant testifying who has some experience with it. And even he had trouble standing up against the rigors of cross-examination. So I agree with everyone's comments that you can do good for a few minutes, but eventually it's going to start to wear down on you, and you just don't understand the pressures of 12 people who have your life in their hands staring at you, plus entire courtroom, and now the entire country watching this as it's taking place. I just don't think she's up to task for it.
And if I could add to that, and you're dealing with bad facts. When you're a lawyer, even if they're bad facts, there's somebody else's bad facts, but these are yours.
That's an amazing point. Joan Summer, they should put the bump man in the front row of the gallery. He's going to be testifying this go around. We've spoken to him recently, and he's getting ready for this trial. The FBI bump man, great guy, and I'm going to get him on the show when I'm able to. Shout out to him and his lovely bride. So I don't know. How do I tell my followers to get in touch with you guys? You can always reach it. Jackie's asking, how do we get in touch with us? survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. Professor Potuto, 2 messages from Donna Adelson, basically outside your house, 10 minutes out, outside your house. Very damning, potentially. This is what Dan Rashbaum was arguing so vigorously about with this delay, the delay of the indictment. How does she get around that? How does Dan get around that?
Yeah, now I would like to backtrack to the first question you asked me about what I would be looking forward to in this trial. I should have said this, because I cannot imagine any credible explanation for somebody saying outside your house who is not, in fact, outside your house, particularly with a response that says 10 minutes. And I would like to hear them give an explanation that isn't subject to huge ridicule. I mean, I'm pretty creative about these things, and I cannot think of one that covers it unless they admit that she was actually outside the house and then come up with a different explanation for why she was there, such as it was the night of the murder. They were stopping just to be sure he was okay, and to find out, even though he apparently indicated he didn't want to go up to Tallahassee, maybe if he would like to ride with them. But I don't see, if they don't acknowledge that those 2 statements mean she was outside the house and he was going to be there in 10 minutes. I don't know how. I hope they will try it, because I would just like to talk about dancing around facts. This one would be just quite the spectacle.
Yeah. Before I get to Dr. Hamilton, to just add on to that, Kimberly B., this is kind of a good point here. Only points I give Donna are for how hard it is to control your face. I have crippling, resting, and it rhymes with witch face. And I've been reminded to check my face in meetings before, because my face says what my mouth can't. Very interesting, because jurors are watching everything. So it's not just what she says, but her facial responses. And if you go back and look at that first hearing in Tallahassee, man, those are some photos of her still shots that were taken by the Tallahassee Democrat that are just wild to look at now, the facial expressions. But Dr. Hamilton, these text messages basically put her at Charlie's house the night of the murder. Really problematic. Same question. How do you get out of that?
Delicately. So she's so the council have tried to, exclude some of that evidence. That's part of the issue with the whether the one testifier will be an expert witness or not. But that's one of the questions about what to expect and what not to expect. So, for example, in Charlie's trial, we didn't suddenly expect this, double extortion plot. So maybe they'd come up with some other theory to explain that her text messages actually meant something else. Who knows? But they will have to have, some kind of creative explanation. Part of my thought here was, are they going to simply admit she lied before? But I can't see how that could be they could spin that with a reasonable explanation. So that'll be interesting, but you never know what comes from this particular team in terms of their new storylines. So again, another reason to watch and live with you.
Yeah. And Josh Ritter, Miranda bringing up another good point. All the context surrounding her taking the stand and the evidence that people are going to hear, including these emails where she urged Wendy to have, among many, have her kids dress up in Nazi uniforms. So there's going to be some animus towards Donna, I guess is one way to put it, ahead of her even probably taking the stand. Is that right?
Oh yeah. And if they're smart, if she does take the stand, they, hopefully they're realizing all of this as well too. And these are the questions that they're asking her at the very beginning on direct. I mean, if they're going to try to do this with any kind of savvy at all, they're going to want to try to take some of the sting out of this and go after these most difficult questions, the text messages, the emails, all of the stuff that we want to hear. They're likely going to go after and ask her on direct in the friendly confines of direct examination. And if I were her counsel, I'd be doing it right away. I'd jump right into all of the stuff that seems to be the most hurtful to her to try to take the sting out of it. I doubt it's going to really take the sting out of it, but the last thing you want to do is ignore it or skip over it or act like it's not a big deal, and then give the prosecution those powerful moments in court when they really nail her to the wall on these things.
This is another great comment, which I guess should be discussed a little more than it has been. I don't think anyone's really talked about it, but during the last hearing, Dan Rashbaum did tell the judge that the state was expecting someone to flip and no one has flipped. What do you say, Professor Potuto? Is that some sort of quiet admission that, look, these people are guilty, no one's flipped yet? Interesting.
It is. It's a very good comment. On the other hand, it could mean they had nothing to flip about. I mean, that's how, if I think he didn't think about the consequences of saying that, but I think where he asked, he would say it's because they didn't have anything that would incriminate anybody else. So how could they flip? There was no deal to be made on basis of what they know.
By the way, I've been talking periodically with Ruth and Phil, and a very tough time for them, very stressful. So God bless the Markel family having to relive this again. It's a lot every time they go to trial. So feel for them for sure, and we're thinking about them. Professor Potuto, this is another one of your great questions. The jailhouse calls. I myself not completely clear about why they're not going to be admitted into evidence. These are the calls post conviction of Charlie when he and Donna, I think we're speaking for 3.5 hours on average a day for that week until she was arrested. What's the deal with those calls? The so-called hot mic, where she thinks she hangs up and doesn't, that is admissible, but why not the others?
Yeah, I think two reasons, and they're related. One is the other discussions, although they put them both in a bad light, are not particularly relevant to anything that the state has to prove at the trial. I said two, I really have three. Two, a large part of what they say is going to be admissible through Donna's statements or other evidence that gets at the same sort of thing. I mean, the discussion about her maybe thinking about suicide and maybe, wanting to flee, that's going to come in now in a million other ways. They don't need that. So there's no reason to introduce something that is not going to really, it's probative, but it adds on. And if it's going to add any kind of appealable issue, why not make the sensible choice? And I do think, as an aside, that Georgia and Sarah do a really terrific job of assessing what they really need and not standing their ground on issues or facts that they have that don't matter significantly and that may raise appealable issues. The other part of this that I think might be going on is the joint defense agreement and privilege, and whether the defense wants to make some arguments. Some of that would be coming under the umbrella privilege. But I think it's a sensible decision. I went back and looked at some of them, and while they put Donna in a really bad light, they don't move the ball in terms of getting the conviction very much. There's a lot of other stuff that puts her in a really bad light. And if it's going to raise any issue that will delay the trial while it's being argued or risk an appealable issue, I think it's a really sensible decision at this point to keep it out and then see if somebody opens the door, and then they'll bring it in on impeachment.
Super interesting. Obviously, incredibly got a law professor. You got two law professors in Josh Ritter. So giving us the insight as to why these moves lawyering is a high stakes chess game. I am learning as I'm doing this show. Grimly Fiendish, literally about to read that. COE literally was just about to read that. Instead, we'll go to this, which I agree with wholeheartedly. Please like and subscribe. If you hate the show, do it twice. But please. Another thing, Josh Ritter, that Jo Potuto pointed out, Donna's got this crazy looking calendar. I wish I was a tenth as organized as she is, but I'm not. And apparently that's not on the list of what's going to I meant to subscribe twice, not unsubscribe, to subscribe. But apparently this calendar is not on the evidence list, so we might not see it. Any thoughts as to why? Because it shows a very controlling nature.
I think Professor Potuto made a really excellent point, and I like the way that she put it, is that part of the prosecution has this responsibility and concern way more than the defense. The prosecution has to constantly be thinking about, I need to get a conviction, but I need to get a conviction that sticks. And so they need to be thinking about not just the moves they're making now, but how will these look on appeal? And so, sometimes you have these pieces of evidence that everybody's going, oh, isn't that fantastic? And doesn't that, really paint them in a horrible light? And won't this be great to show that to people? But is it just kind of juicy, or does it actually move the needle? And is this helpful to us? And is the juice worth the squeeze, as far as, am I running up against possible appellate issues if I bring this in? And sometimes that is the better, caution is kind of the better strategy. And if I don't need it, why muddy the waters? Why get myself into an area that could cause problems? Let's go ahead and stick to the things that we have, which are very, very strong, and not open up the door on appeal. And so that could be the thinking behind it. I'm not sure if that's exactly what applies here in this case, but that could be the thinking, because these are very, very talented and smart prosecutors.
This is just an interesting question here. sort of a rhetorical here, I think. But if Donna and Harvey delivered the money the night of the murder, who stapled the money and when did it get moldy? I mean, these are the craziest questions, but sadly, they're part of this case. So Dr. Hamilton, there's a woman named Sarah Youssef. She is a law school friend of Wendy Adelson. Apparently, they were such good friends that she was in Wendy's wedding party. And then she has reportedly turned around and reached out to the state. We don't know what it's about. Any guesses? It's certainly interesting.
No, I don't have guesses. But and then I don't know if this person is a practicing attorney, but if so, or even if not, having gone through law school is, we tend to, after legal training, have a respect for the law. So she might have decided that friendship is not as important as respect for the law and doing the responsible thing and reporting if she saw some kind of legal violation or maybe perjury. But that's speculating. But I do think that those of us who are lawyers, we generally have a significant respect for the law and the court, and might be more likely to report things that we think are infringing the law, or at least that might suspect that did amount to perjury. But in terms of what she has, not quite clear.
Yeah, and Professor Potuto, I mean, just your thoughts on Sarah Youssef. That's a big potential X factor, but more importantly, it's reportedly information. You think it's information about Wendy. So how would that translate into this trial with Donna?
Yeah, it is curious because the conversations, as far as you can tell from what we know, the conversations and the information she has is coming from Wendy. So it could be equivalent to Charlie's trial, where Jeff was allowed to testify about what Wendy told him Charlie said once Wendy denied it and therefore was used as impeachment. So it may be that sort of round, the same sort of end around. Someone will testify and then Sarah's information can be used to impeach the evidence. Otherwise, we just don't know because we don't know what she knows. And it's, I wish they didn't care about the trial and just thought, let's satisfy the curiosity of we onlookers who are so interested. But sadly, they have a more important goal in mind.
Just going around the horn here with another interesting variable, guy named Scott Radius, Josh Ritter. He was a friend of Charlie Adelson's and was living in Southeast Asia. And now there are messages that are coming out where Harvey Adelson is reaching out to Scott Radius. And basically, Charlie had invested in a rental property in Vietnam. And now once he's convicted, Harvey starts asking him questions. What do you think the deal is with Scott Radius, why he would come forward? Part of the reason might be is now he's not having to pay them back because they're all in prison. But how important a witness could he be potentially?
I don't know. I think it comes back to what Dr. Hamilton was saying, is that some of these people are kind of seeing, these anyone connected to this start to just be picked off one by one, and they're just thinking, you know what, I'm going to distance myself from this as much as possible, and even if I know something that might not be all that important, I'm going to make sure I come forward about it now, so I don't get caught up in some text stream or email exchange down the line that paints me in a bad light. I want to make sure the authorities know I'm coming forward about it and happy to share with them whatever information I have, because, everything is coming to light. They have been watching and listening and reading emails and texts for years. And I don't think anyone can assume is hidden or not discovered by the prosecution at this point. And it might just be a bunch of people kind of wiping their hands of this whole mess and saying, listen, I'm here if you want to talk, and I have nothing to do with this.
Dr. Hamilton, correct me if I'm wrong. I think for a time you were also a corrections officer. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
So she's been around criminals. From Jody, do you think they have someone watching Wendy in case she decides to skip the country like her parents did, followed by this one? I'm sure Wendy is feeling the heat. If Wendy flees to another country before or after testifying, she'd be forfeiting the $2 million for the boys and the $5,000 a month from Social Security. Do you think Wendy would do that? I mean, what do you think if you had to go in there, and I know it's tough, her mindset right now? Mom and dad tried to make a run for it. Do you think it runs in the family? Literally, you think they'll be running? She'll be running.
Sure. What we've seen a lot of times for this family is they share common personality characteristics, then they feed off each other. So Donna has already done some of the investigation work. So some of the platform is already there in terms of the information about what countries are accessible and what have you. She certainly has means. I think the most important thing that would keep Wendy from fleeing is her boys. So I don't think she'd leave the country without the boys. So, but it could be that she figured out a way to take them. I do think that law enforcement are going to be watching and looking for signs that she's also fleeing, because as they've seen her mother is now that is some precedent for the idea that they think that that's fair as well. So they probably are watching for signs of that kind of movement.
So interesting. I've said it before. If I'm Wendy Adelson, I'm in a boat rowing to Cuba right now, because law enforcement that I've talked to say that they've got her passport flagged right now. And she's gonna have a real hard time getting away. And just, oh man, this is
She's not booking a flight to Vietnam, that's for sure.
no, definitely not one way. Wendy, if you're going to do it, at least buy a two-way ticket, please. I urge you. But just talking about this raises my blood pressure. Jimmy McNutty to the professor. Jimmy's been a trial watcher since OJ, so he might as well be a law professor himself. It's an interesting question. I'm curious, Professor, who goes on the stand first, Sarah, Youssef, or Wendy? If Sarah takes a stand, we don't know. That affects Wendy's testimony. I think Sarah should go after Wendy, and then Wendy will have fear of what is to come. Again, it's all chess. I didn't realize what a game of chess lawyering is. What do you say to this, Jo Potuto?
I don't know all the evidence, but I think I agree with him. I think getting Wendy on to nail down this time again, we never know what she's going to say, what she says, and then bring on the witnesses that may impeach. It will also, I would think, now they have deposed Sarah, though, have they not? I think they have. So they've got an idea of what she's going to say. And so it may not matter quite as much, because presumably Wendy, when she's on the stand, will not be worrying what Sarah is going to say, because they'll have the deposition by her. But I guess, and Josh may have better instincts about this, I guess my instinct would be to put her on first and then put on all the people who are going to show that one or another parts of her testimony are either lies or at least can be called into question.
By the way, best thing you can do for us at STS are working hard to bring this content. Just tell a friend about the show. Tell them to watch. They'll like it. Professor, back to you on this, since this was your question too. Sigfredo Garcia, chance that he would testify this time around. What do you think in trying to implicate Donna?
Yeah, I know that everybody has said he hasn't done it so far. Why would he do it now? But he's sitting with the mother of his two children, sitting in prison. And I believe there was information earlier that he had said to her, take care of yourself, don't worry about me. And it may be that he will soften about providing information, particularly as it gets to the people that I would blame most for the fact that I'm sitting in prison. Now, I should, if I had a brain, would blame myself for going ahead and shooting somebody that I didn't even know. But, the people who put him up to it, and I would suspect from his point of view, put Katie up to it, that there might be some more push in his mind to incriminate. And I do think he probably doesn't have much, but I do think he may have a couple of things. Luis Rivera said that Sigfredo had some sort of map and some sort of information about from Miami to Tallahassee, how they were going to find Dan Markel, which makes sense. I mean, otherwise, how would he have gotten there? And nobody's been able to testify to that. Luis has said, he sort of inferred from what Sigfredo was doing, what Sigfredo had, in his hand. But he can talk about that, and there may be something we don't know about that he'd have some information about. Probably isn't a lot, but in a circumstantial case, every little bit helps build the circumstantial evidence case in a way that becomes overwhelming.
Here we go. Phantom 6000, friend of mine from LA. Hey, Joel, and an attorney. Scott Radius made a calculated move. No docs, no legality. He turned them in and took the money. Not a hero. Good point, Phantom. Yeah. I hear you on all that. Yeah, I hear you, and I think that a lot of that is accurate. I think some of it was literally a financial deal for him, and it's paying off, from what I understand, because there's a chunk of money coming his way that that Harvey actually wanted returned. Speaking of the relationship between Scott Radius and Charlie Adelson, Josh Ritter, Charlie's on the state's witness list. Does he actually testify for the state?
I mean, I don't know, because again, it's like, what do they? He's a wild card, right? I mean, one, he could refuse. Two, he's a wild card. They don't know what exactly he's going to say. He's already convicted now, so he doesn't really care as much. If let's go with the hypothetical, he does decide to go ahead and testify and doesn't invoke any kind of privilege. They can't predict that he's going to even stick to the story that he gave in his trial, because at this point, it's like, for him to be called a liar is the least of his problems. So it's kind of like, what are they really going to get out of it? He would be completely unpredictable, and I don't know if they need it when they really have what they need out of him through other means. And so I don't see it happening. I don't see what it gets them that they can't get otherwise. And I think the threat of it turning into some sort of sideshow that takes the focus of the jurors away from Donna might be too hot for the prosecution to handle.
By the way, we are ever evolving here in at STS. So if you like these noon shows, let the COE know. Great thing about non-traditional media, we are not married to any time slot. And we get a much more international crew, which I like at this time. So let us know. As I said, we are ever evolving and trying to figure out the sweet spot for everyone to join. So, Professor Potuto, back to you. I mean, how much of a necessary asset is Charlie to Dan Rashbaum? He, I think, has to explain away why Donna was, quote unquote, in his opinion, not involved.
Or Donna does. I mean, somehow somebody's got to explain that through evidence. Rashbaum can't just get up in front of the jury and assert what occurred. He's got to have evidence that puts it on. And I don't know, is there anyone other, I'm trying to think about this now, anyone other than Donna or Charlie who would have firsthand information about the not the bump itself, they've got the video and the recording of that, but on the circumstances that occurred and what he told Donna and what Donna believed. I mean, sitting here, I can't think of anybody. If they don't have one or the other, I don't know how they can get enough of that in.
By the way, Asian American Legal Focus been doing amazing work on this. Although Luis thought that Sigfredo knew and had met Wendy, Sigfredo pointed out a woman on the street and said, "Hey, that's Wendy." But then you've got this comment from Sarah Fernley. Great point here. Snitches get stitches. Garcia would need protective custody for life. If you did a proffer, Garcia needs to be allowed to meet with Katie to improve her memory. Dr. Hamilton, I mean, this is your world. This is the reason Charlie Adelson is traveling from South Dakota because he basically threw the Latin Kings gang under the bus. I mean, this is a reason why we might not hear from Sigfredo, correct?
Yes. So in that kind of world, there can be a mindset of you don't snitch no matter what, even if there's value to you. Now that would distinguish the two defendants, one of whom has testified, but the other hasn't. And it could be that he just firmly believes that that's not what you do. And there might be additional threats to him if he does. One additional thing, or just a practical thought on why Charlie, my guess is he will testify. And it's practical. It's based on bureaucracy. And that's just the prosecutors have to basically justify to their supervisors why spend all of this money and resources to get Charlie all the way back here if you're really not going to put him on the stand. And that is, more of a bureaucratic administrative thing than, that sometimes can override trial strategy. So just a thought on that particular angle.
By the way, and I just want to make this very brief because it's obviously incredibly sensitive, but everyone is assuming that Wendy will not leave her children. And this is my own personal opinion. I'm not so sure about that. So who knows? Zach Sawyer, Josh Ritter, interesting question. It comes up often. Are criminal defense attorneys ever told by their clients that they are guilty? Would it be unethical for Dan Rashbaum to defend Donna if she, in fact, has told him this?
The answer is yes and no. Yes, sometimes they are told by their clients that they are guilty. Oftentimes they're told by their clients that they are guilty. I will say that I've had many clients who are truthful to a point with me. They may share a lot of information, but then it's amazing how stubborn they will be, even with their own attorney, the only person on earth they should be really telling everything to, and they will still hide things because, they just feel like they're going to get away with it. But as far as, the ethics involved for a defense attorney, it's fairly clear cut that your job is to zealously advocate on behalf of your client within the bounds of the law. So they're going to put on a robust defense. They're going to do everything that they can to defend her and poke holes in the prosecution. A lot of a defense attorney's job is about holding the government to task, to make sure that the government did everything properly and that no evidence is being admitted that should not be admitted, and just protecting the constitutional rights of your client. And if that includes putting on defenses that are sometimes hard to believe or sometimes a little fantastical, no problem, as long as you are, again, staying within the bounds of the law, to the point that, you will sometimes see where those concerns might be in conflict with each other. And we saw that in the Tejas case out of Vegas, where they had him testify by means of a narrative because I think, though this was never said in court, you had a situation where the attorney may not have felt like he could bet his bar card on the way his client was going to testify, but his client had the right to go ahead and testify. So even in those situations, that's probably the farthest bounds of where an attorney will go, and just say, fine, if you're going to go ahead and testify to some things that I know are either not true or I don't agree with, I'll allow you to testify in narrative form. But, as far as the ethical concerns of an attorney, as long as you are not suborning perjury, as long as you are not knowingly defrauding the court, then your job is to zealously advocate on behalf of this person, because that's what the Constitution requires. That's what your job requires. That's what this whole system's about.
Josh, I will never tell you that I'm guilty when I tell you. Don't worry. Becky Ireland, this is a great point. Professor Potuto, the state paid $9,511 to transport Charlie back to Florida. Why, if he's not going to help the state's case? One of the sort of curveballs that you brought in, which is fascinating, is it possible under any circumstance that Charlie Adelson may have cut a deal that no one is aware of at this point?
In my view, it's impossible, only because I just don't believe that sort of secret could be kept from every, to mix a metaphor, watchful ear out there, and there would be no hint, no scintilla of a hint that that's going on. But I suppose I shouldn't, anything in this world, I suppose, when you get out to the end of the bell curve, could be possible. I just don't think that's it. Not because I don't think it's impossible that he wouldn't decide to. I just think it's impossible that we wouldn't have some whiff of it by now.
Dr. Hamilton, that's a great point. It's hard to keep things quiet these days. April the 1st. Does anyone think there's a chance Donna's going to be acquitted? Everyone here talking as though she's already convicted. It's a good point, Dr. Hamilton. As they say, it only takes one. Scott here says acquitted, no chance, but could have a holdout. Certainly hope not. Where do you put the odds, I guess, the percentages that she could be acquitted versus conviction?
Always a chance. And I think, so one of the comments is that age should be irrelevant. Yes, it should, but that doesn't mean that jurors are not biased based on things such as age and race and ethnicity. So here, there could be one holdout who simply will not believe that an older female, and it is relevant sometimes to the public about their biases based on that. So one could simply say, I don't believe that an older female and white could be capable of that. That's always possible.
Alice Feld, who is a lawyer in Florida. I like the daytime shows now that I'm semi-retired. We got Poland in the house. It's amazing. I've been collecting a list of the different countries that are in this chat right now, and I will read them off at the end of the show today, and people will be amazed where people are coming from. Professor Potuto, Wendy.
Yeah.
Last week's hearing, Georgia was heard on an open mic saying, Wendy. What is going on with that?
Well, everybody loved it. I guess everybody who shares my feelings about Wendy, I thought it was telling, but only telling in terms of confirming what we already knew Georgia felt about Wendy. And then there was a line afterwards that I know some people thought they could translate. I couldn't. I had no idea what she said next. But it was interesting where it came at the hearing. I mean, it wasn't, as I recall, it wasn't related to anything that they were discussing at that point or that they were about to discuss at that point. So I guess I would say it shows what we all probably thought, that Wendy is foremost in her mind right now. And that's nice to have confirmed. And I thought it was lovely. You know what it reminded me of? The Marsha from the All Brady Bunch? Because that was the intonation and spacing of it.
By the way, this is hilarious. L. Road, I want to read this comment, so I'm not bringing it up. L. Road says, I'm on jury duty making all the jurors watch STS while we wait. Please take a photo of that, Survive the Survivor Gmail. Don't get arrested, though, but that's awesome. Make sure the bailiffs know about it, and the judge and the attorneys. And send me some best guests. From Andrew, Jo Potuto, right back to you on this. Do you think we're going to hear more evidence that we haven't heard yet? If so, what can we expect, in your opinion?
Well, I know it's likely we're going to hear from Sarah. We may or may not hear something from Robert. Certainly, we're going to hear about the evidence of consciousness of guilt. That's all in the terms of it wasn't at the last trial. So there are a number of things we know we're going to hear. If the question means, is there something else that we don't know about? Well, we don't know what we don't know. I'd like to be a prophet, but somehow nobody gave that to me when I was born, and I think it's too late now. Josh, you should look for your daughter. I think you could make a lot of money if you could do that well. There was always, I think in all of the trials, there was always a little something that was a surprise that no one really anticipated. And there's no reason to believe it won't happen here. But anything significant that we don't know about yet, that I'd be surprised to know is out there.
Yeah. Josh Ritter, one of the people that really goes under the radar. And by the way, there was a great comment that Donna Adelson is 74 now, but she was 63 years old when she committed this crime, and it's easy to forget that. But one of the people that is, really gone largely under the radar is Harvey Adelson, who my mom from day one has said is definitely, in on this. So do you think that they would go after him, or is he simply just kind of too old to deal? I hate saying that, but he's in his early 80s now, and they've got Wendy in their sights, we assume. Is there any scenario where you'd see them going after Harvey potentially before Wendy?
I don't think they're concerned about his age, and I don't think they're concerned about the order in which they indict people. I think they're concerned about, do they have the evidence to back it up in court, because they have demonstrated they're not going to indict people unless they feel like they have a rock solid enough case. I was thinking about this because Jack Campbell, the state attorney, made a statement, and I wrote it down when Donna was arrested, and he said at the time that they did not have evidence to arrest Harvey at the time of Donna's arrest. Now, what was interesting about that is you can look at that two ways. That either means that everything that they know, they don't believe that he was involved, or they just don't think they have enough at the time when they had to move quickly because she was getting on a plane to Vietnam. So to me, there's a way to look at that to say that they absolutely believe he's involved. They absolutely believe that he's somehow implicated, but they just are not able to connect those, push pins and strings enough to get him involved with enough evidence to hold up beyond a reasonable doubt in court. So that comment to me had nothing to do with age. That comment to me had entirely to do with, they had to move quickly. They had enough for Donna. They didn't have enough for him, but that doesn't mean that they don't feel like he's not involved. And that doesn't mean that they're not still looking, and who knows what might be developed since then.
I'm hoping the guests can stick around for about another 15, maybe 20 minutes, because the professor gave me some interesting things here. This more is, speculation than anything based necessarily in reality, but it is certainly interesting. So Professor Potuto, if Wendy, first of all, could Wendy and Harvey be arrested together? And if Wendy was arrested and went to trial, do you think she'd testify at her own trial?
Well, let me start with Wendy. I think she would be the best witness against her, because unless she's able to modify substantially how she appears on the witness stand, I just think she is a terrible witness. And every time, and maybe it's probably my bias, because every time I hear her, I think she's worse. And that's maybe me with my
And how
memory.
come? How come? She's got kind of
She's got an entitled, I get a feel for, I'm better than you. Her answers are always quibbling. I say, were you there? And she will say, do you mean, was I, 2 minutes from there? She won't give you a yes or no. And then she has what annoys me. I mean, I can't even imagine a student doing this to me in class, where she'll give an answer, flat out answer, and then Georgia will confront her with something that is diametrically opposed to what she just said, and she'll say yes and move on. And it just, no admission that there's any contradiction, and it just drives me nuts. So it may be just me that I have such a strong visceral reaction, but I do. So I think she's her own worst evidence. I think if I were her lawyer, if there was any way to keep her off the stand, I would, partly because I just think she's a terrible witness, partly because of some of the things they have that they might be able to impeach her on, the immunity issues and how those are going to be dealt with, put to the side. And some of that may not be able to get in otherwise. And generally, as Josh said, you usually don't want your defendant to testify. And you said, and I think you were right, Josh, they have to do almost perfectly. And I cannot imagine her coming close to it. She's really smart, but boy, she just gives off this air of, I don't know why you have me here, and I'm going to tell you incredible things. I mean, I should stop but how could she say, I didn't read the indictment? I have no idea who was charged with it. How could anybody say that and expect anyone to believe it? I guess that's part of what annoys me so much.
Especially as an attorney.
I couldn't believe it. Sorry.
Yeah. No, especially as an attorney. And
yes.
I think you're 100% right. She even said, I'll never be arrested. And those words might come back to haunt her. And I've watched Georgia, and I've watched her up close, and she's as good as it gets, as is Sarah Dugan. And I don't know. We don't know what we don't know, but I have a feeling that they know a little bit more than we do. I like this STS time slot as I live in Prague. It's blown me away where people are from here. So that begs the question, Dr. Hamilton, who teaches in the UK, why do you think people from literally all around the world, and I probably asked you this question before, are so intrigued by this particular case? And thank you, Black Widow, and the Republic of Ireland.
So one of the things that I think resonates is you have defendants who, at least some of the defendants, who look unlike most, which are upper class white people. Although you do have some defendants who are of other racial or ethnic backgrounds, and so that differentiates this case. And it is a murder case; it's a murder for hire case, which you don't get a whole lot of. And so I think that just the sociodemographics of the defendants here make it fascinating. It's also true that in some countries, some Western countries, is they allow very little public information about trials as they're going on. In other words, the U.S. is a little bit different in terms of permitting public information about trials during the progress. So in some countries, is they're not able to see this level of detail of the actual trials while they're going on. And so this is a way for them to look on the inside of what actually happens in the trials. There's different flavors of this case that differentiates it from most other cases that I think is appealing to a lot of true crime aficionados around the world.
By the way, good news for everyone, because during the trial, the entire time, starting with the first day of jury selection, I'll be doing lunch lives. Most of them will just be featuring yours truly, telling you what has happened in the first half of the day. So that will be every day during this time slot, at least during the duration of the trial. I agree with Jody. She says, I know the goal is to get Wendy, but what about Harvey? It seems to me like he's just as guilty as the rest of this motley crew, and it drives me crazy just because he's elderly. I heard Josh Ritter say it's not necessarily age. It's a fascinating case here because people like this have so much already, still want more. Yeah, true. Trust me, I see it in Miami every day. 3 Lamborghinis are never enough. You need a 4th Lamborghini or a 5th. Best guest, just love the commentary from these guests. Rachel, thank you for asking. Do you have your Sun Pass ready for your commute to the trial? I sure do. Steve Cohen might have to film the entire ride. I'm taking basically the exact same route, whatever your preference is, as Luis and Sigfredo, as those guys literally grew up 20 blocks from where I'm sitting right now. Steve Cohen, do you feel like holding a camera out the window for 8 hours? We could stream it live. The drive will put you to sleep. I'll tell you that right now. There's no nothing in Florida, no mountains, no hills, nothing. Another pair of very interesting questions, and I promise we'll start to wind up. This comes from the professor. Professor, I'll have you answer your own question. What evidence could be introduced against Wendy without violating her immunity? And would the judge need to rule that Wendy breached the immunity agreement? This has to do with impeachment and all these things. Please explain it so someone like myself can understand it.
Well, anything that happened before she got on the stand, any evidence that they developed before she actually got on the stand and started to give evidence, could not have been derived from anything she said on the stand. So all of that, whatever it is in, if the state wants to use it, subject to relevance issues and other evidentiary challenges. Anything that the state developed even after she testified that it can show that came from a source independent of her testimony is admissible. With that evidence, there may be some argument that the state got a clue from what she said, and that's what led them to find it. So it's always feasible that there has to be some sort of ruling about that, but it is generally admissible. It didn't come from her. Anything that came from other people, unless the other person was discovered because of her testimony, is admissible. What is arguably not admissible Well, what is not admissible unless the immunity deal goes down is anything she testified to and anything the state is going to use that it got only from her testimony. In other words, they didn't find it from any other source, or they would not inevitably have found it from some other source. So there's a lot of evidence out there that can get in whether she keeps the immunity or not. The immunity issue is she was told that anything she said could not be used against her. Anything that derived from what she said could not be used against her, so long as she testified truthfully. And so if there's something they want to use that is her testimony or derived from it, I believe, and Josh, you may know more than I do about this, because from the teaching side and from the constitutional cases I know, it appears as though there first has to be a decision that she's breached the agreement before the impeachment use would be available. But I've heard lawyers on the show believe that you can do the impeachment use without that prior decision. And I was going to try to research it a little more and see. There's not a lot on it as to whether there has to first be the decision that she's breached. Because what I have found is, and this is getting in the weeds, and I'm sorry, Jill, but what I have found so far is the impeachment use of the immunized testimony is still a use for purposes of the use derivative use immunity grant. So, Joe, I don't know. What I don't know is with any impeachment use, whether first there would have to be a decision that she breached it because she lied, and then the impeachment use is available, or whether impeachment use is like any other trial and any other witness. I just
Josh,
don't
know. I guess this is sort of another way. I'm going to let you jump in, Josh, but to this question kind of poses a question in a different way. If she lied, does everything she said on the stand come in, or only the things she lied about, Josh, and whatever?
That's what we're talking about, is that the breach of her agreement with the government would only take place on what she lied about, and would they be able to immediately impeach her upon that? I think the answer is that they should be allowed to impeach her on it, like they would anyone with a prior inconsistent statement. This is prior statement she's made under oath, and if those are contradictory to what she's now testifying to, they can use that even in spite of her immunity agreement. But I think in practice, we would see a bunch of attorneys jumping to their feet and asking to go sidebar and discuss all of this with the judge, because I'm sure if the prosecution feels that she's opened the door on something, they're going to want to have the defense, and the prosecution would be smart to have a ruling by the judge made just to protect everyone before they actually get into it. I think that's how it would actually play out, rather than, these kind of gotcha moments in court that we're all hoping for.
Ned Smith here says, I want an STS shirt that says, I will never be arrested. The quote by Wendy Adelson. To Dr. Hamilton, would Wendy's interview with the detectives, would that be enough to turn, that she's saying would be enough to turn a jury? Would that be admissible if Wendy was indicted?
Oh, I don't remember enough about the facts of her deal in that interview, but hasn't it been introduced in the prior trials? Am I not remembering that correctly?
I honestly don't recall, but someone here will know more than I do. So please fill us in. I do not recall.
You mean the whole tape, the whole interview, the 5 hours worth? That hasn't been introduced. They've used portions to impeach her, I believe.
And that would be used again, Jo Potuto.
Sure, because that's perfectly okay. That's whatever she said before she got on the witness stand is impeachment use, just as any other witness. It has nothing to do with the immunity grant.
Right.
And then, Professor, you also brought up, the Trescott story about why she drove by the house, which to me is unbelievably incriminating. And you're asking which story would she use this time around if she was on trial? I mean, how damning is that for her?
Well, you would think on the day of your husband's murder, you would remember the route you took to get to lunch. And you would think that before you got on the stand the first time, you would check to see what you told the detective in that interview the day of the murder. And then when you got on the stand the second time, you would check to see what you said the first time. I mean, what she does on the stand is inexplicable to me, just inexplicable to me. I cannot explain it, which is another way to say it's inexplicable to me. Sorry.
Yeah. Two more interesting questions that Professor Potuto posed to me. These are awesome. And I love having her on because she actually does my homework, which is even better. What's better than that? The question is, why didn't Harvey want Scott Radius, his friend of Charlie in Asia, to tell Charlie about the WhatsApp conversations regarding the villa? What's your theory on that? Do you have one, Professor Potuto?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you about your own question.
I think that Charlie knew they were planning to leave. I know there's some. The evidence is not entirely clear. I think that request of Scott, because Scott was also going to have a phone call or had phone calls with Charlie at the jail, and that Harvey did not want any evidence about their trip to end up on a taped phone call that the prison or the jail and then the police could get, and then they'd have more reason to trail them and stop them from leaving the country. So I don't think it had anything to do with them trying to hide it from Charlie. I think it had to do with them trying to keep it secret from law enforcement.
I'm learning a ton. A final question that Jo Potuto posed that I'm going to pose right back to her, and then we'll get final thoughts. By the way, the trial date, jury selection starts the 17th. That is this coming Tuesday. It's so crazy because I remember making the drive up with Steve Cohen for Charlie's trial, and it does not seem like it is nearly a year ago. Time flies, I guess. Jo Potuto's final question here. The state lists Tara Kawas, James Lewis, Sigfredo's first lawyer, Francis McBanawa, Katie's brother, David Marcus, Charlie's previous attorney. Any guess what collectively, where they could collectively could go evidence-wise with them?
To me?
To you. It's your question,
Okay.
Jo.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I gave them to you in my job as legal assistant. To your show. I was doing a service to STF. I think Marcus has made a motion not to appear, and the state has agreed, and I don't know what the defense is doing with it. He said he has no evidence. I'm wondering, well, clearly it's the brother, but it's the two lawyers who were involved with the co-conspirators who've been convicted early on. They were involved early on. So, you suspect maybe it has to do with who was paying for it. Maybe it has to do with some of the information that otherwise might have been covered by the, if they had an umbrella privilege for all of them. They're going to get for Katie, Tara, presumably she's waiving any lawyer privilege, attorney-client privilege that she has to allow her lawyer to testify. I don't know what Sigfredo has done with regard to his lawyer. But it's interesting because you would think those lawyers might know something about what was going on early on that they could share.
This has honestly been a total learning experience for me. Learned a ton today thanks to the professors and Josh Ritter. Josh Ritter is a former 2015 Outstanding Prosecutor of the Year in Los Angeles. He's one half of Eldabe Ritter. He's also one half of three girls, his wife contributing to that as well. And he also hosts Courtroom Confidential. Josh, just a few days out from this, how close are you going to be watching it? And any final thoughts as we head into trial?
I'm going to be watching it very closely. Trying to cover as much of it as I can on my channel, because I really do feel this is going to be the greatest test yet for the prosecution on this case, because we are, like I said, we're moving, one iteration farther away from the actual trigger men with each of these trials. And now Donna, I think they can make the connection. I think they've drawn those links before, and they can point, all trails do point back to Donna, but it's going to take a little bit more effort to really help the jurors to understand that connection, several degrees of separation later, how she should be implicated and held responsible for murder.
Dr. Melissa Hamilton, always an amazing guest. She's a senior lecturer of law and criminal justice at the University of Surrey School of Law, that is in the UK. She holds both a JD and a PhD and is a former corrections officer. I'm always amazed at the many careers, interesting careers people have on the show. I will let you, Dr. Hamilton, take it out however you please, whatever you'd like to leave us with.
3 points. One is just the prosecutors here have been just so tenacious. They've been writing on this for years and years. You don't see that very often. So good on them. Second is, did I miss a good financial strategy of investing in real estate in Vietnam? And then the third thing is I just want to agree with Professor Potuto in terms of I also had a visceral reaction to watching Wendy testify. She was trying to control it and play it, and I didn't really appreciate her responses. So I thought I was the only one that had that kind of reaction. I thought everyone else thought that she did wonderful. So I just wanted to confirm I as well did not like it. And that's it for me.
Yeah, it's a little nauseating, I would say, to watch. Jo Potuto, what can you say about the professor other than she's very smart, bright, and brings great questions? And she's from New Jersey, my home state. So it's a win all around. She is the Richard H. Larson Professor of Constitutional Law Emerita at the University of Nebraska College of Law. She's taught at North Carolina, Chapel Hill, one of the best schools in the country, Oregon, Arizona, Rutgers, right next to where I am from, Seton Hall, which is in Jersey, Cardozo, New York City. Do you happen to know who Richard H. Larson is, Dr. Potuto?
He was a donor to the Law College and an alum. More than that, I know not.
I don't want to plug my book, but my book starts, I will right now, because my book starts off in the nursing home where my father was before he passed away. And there are all these oil paintings in there of the donors, and they're all like, they've all been dead at least 50 years. And I was just looking at these paintings, wondering what these people did, who they were, and if anyone would ever even give them a second thought unless they're walking through the halls of Miami Jewish. So that's why I asked you about Richard. I'm always curious who these people are. But Dr. Jo Potuto, your final thoughts, take it wherever you would like.
Yeah, I too would like to both note that the people who have been following this trial for 10 years now, or not the trial, but the murder and what's come after it for 10 years now, have done really yeoman service, because there's so many murders that go into the unsolved pile, or where all the potential perpetrators are never caught. And in that line, I really would like to say something about the work that the police and the investigators did at the outset. I just thought it was a remarkable job of gathering evidence that really has been the foundation for every one of these trials. And the work they did at the start, to find the cell phone records, to find the Sun Pass, to locate the rental car, to track the rental car information. The cameras, tracking the information on cameras and going through, I can only imagine, hours of tape that was irrelevant, both at the gym and on the buses and along the route, and doing it at a time when they weren't sure they were ever going to be able to find enough to make a case against anyone. That's a really incredible investment of time and effort and talent that I think, at least for me, often goes unnoticed, because we see the end result when it looks good and we say, gee, you did a good job. But just to think about what they had to do from day one to get there, all the interviews they did that probably didn't lead anywhere. And then once in a while, there's a gem because they were so thorough. And we've seen some trials now in the last maybe few months where the police didn't do a thorough job at the start, and what that has meant in terms of being able to have a successful prosecution. So I think I'd like to end with a real thank you to the work they did.
Really appreciate that, Jo Potuto. I hope you guys are hearing me, because in the middle of Jo Potuto's final thoughts, I said, oh no, she froze up, and it was me that froze up. So by the way, if you are interested, and people will make fun of me, the book could really change your life. It's my mom's story. She's a Holocaust survivor, and 90% of it is life advice, available anywhere you buy books, Amazon, and it is available around the world on Amazon and elsewhere. And you will learn something from my beloved mother, who I am taking to a show this evening to see an international journalist speaking here in Miami. So that is that. Greatly appreciate the best guests. And I'm going to now, oh, by the way, tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we'll work on these show times. But we've got, if you're wondering what it's like to testify in one of these trials, we've got two people who have testified, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Yindra Velasquez, and I think we're going to have a third who is friends with the Adelsons coming on the show tomorrow night, kind of give us inside baseball. It'll be a little bit different type of show. And then Thursday, Steve Cohen is working on what I think will be really interesting, 3 different judges to talk about what judges go through in a trial, what has happened. Everyone universally kind of loves Judge Stephen Everett. So we are going to speak to these judges about how he prepares for this case, what it is like to sit on the bench during such a high-profile case, and what is of interest to him specifically from a judicial standpoint, being a judge. So that is Thursday. Also, Thursday morning, we will have the hearing for you live, and then Friday, Great Scott, your True Crime Phil. Then next week, the COE is doing a show on Monday, and I'm driving to Tallahassee, and then it's going to be all Donna all the time. But justice for Dan Markel. These are just some of the countries that were here today. Take a listen. The UK, South Africa, Switzerland, France, Mexico. Hawaii is not a country, but you get it. Israel, New Zealand, Nigeria, Germany, Spain, Ireland, Croatia, the Republic of Ireland, Croatia. My mother's from Serbia. Netherlands, Poland, Hungary, Malawi, Central Africa, Prague, and Wales.
Prague is not a country either.
Yeah, Prague, Czechoslovakia. You're right.
Okay.
You're right. The professor is correcting me, as she should. You get the idea. It is a global show, lest you think otherwise. Love you, America. Love you, Jersey. Dr. Hamilton, I don't know where you are, so I'll just say love you, Surrey, or Texas is where you're usually at. Love you, Los Angeles. And, of course, love you, Tallahassee. Justice for Dan Markel. See you tomorrow.